Frostbite, Chapter 21. This was so not what I needed right now. I could have handled anything else. Arundel hitting on her, getting her to smoke his ridiculous cigarettes, whatever. But not this. Lisa quitting those pills was exactly what I could wanted to avoid. Reluctantly, I pulled out of her head and returned to my own grim situation. I could have liked to see what further developed with Adrian and Lisa, but watching them could do no good. Okay, I really needed a plan now. I needed action. I needed to get us out of here. But glancing around me, I found myself no closer to escape than I had been earlier, and I spent the next few hours bombarding and speculating. We had 3 guards today. They looked a little bored, but not enough to slack off. Nearby, Ed appeared unconscious, and Manson stared blankly at the floor. Across the room, Christian glared at nothing in particular, but I think Mia was sleeping. Painfully aware of how dry my throat was, I almost laughed in recalling how I could told her water magic was useless. It might not do much in a fight, but I could have given anything for her to summon up some magic. Why had not I thought of this before? We were not helpless, not entirely. A plan, slowly concealed in my mind, a plan that was probably incense but was also the best we had. My heart thudded with anticipation, and I immediately scolded my features to calmness before the guards noticed my sudden insights. On the opposite side of the room, Christian was watching me. He could see the brief flare of excitement and realized I could thought of something. He watched me curiously, as ready for action as I was. God, how could we pull this off? I needed his help, but I had no real way of letting him know what I had in mind. In fact, I was not even sure if we could help me at all. He was pretty weak. I held his gaze, willing him to understand that something was going to happen. There was a confusion on his face, but I was spared with a determination. After making sure none of the gods were looking directly at me, I shifted slightly, giving a small tap at my wrist. I glanced behind me as much as I could, then met Christian's eyes again. He frowned, and I repeated the gesture. Hey, I said loudly. Mia and Manson both jerked in surprise. Are you guys really going to keep stabbing us? Cannot we at least have some water or something? Shut up, said one of the guards. It was pretty standard answer whenever any of us spoke. Come on, I used my best bitchy voice. Not even like a slip of something. My throat is burning, particularly on fire. My gaze flickered to Christian as I said those last few words, then returned to the guard who could spoken. As expected, he rose from his seat and marched towards me. Don't make me repeat myself, he growled. I don't know if he could really do anything violent, but I had no interest in pushing it just yet. Besides, I could accomplish my goal. If Christian could not take the hint, there was nothing else to done for it. Hoping I looked afraid, I shut up. The guard returned to his seat, and after a while he stopped watching me. I looked at Christian again and gave that wrist tap. Come on, I thought. Put it together, Christian. His eyebrows suddenly shot up, and he stared at me in amazement. Well, he could apparently figure out something. I just hoped it was what I could wanted. His look turned questioningly as though asking if I was really serious. I nodded empathetically. He frowned in thought for a few moments and then took a deep, steady breath. All right, he said. Everyone jumped again. Shut up, said one of the gods automatically. He sounded weary. No, said Christian. I'm ready to drink. Everyone in the room froze for the space of few heartbeats, including me. This was not exactly what I had in mind. The guard's leader stood up. Don't screw around with us. I'm not, said Christian. He had a feverish, despite look on his face that I don't think was entirely faked. I'm tired of this. I wanted to get out of here, and I don't want to die. I will drink, and I want her. He nodded towards me. Mia squeaked in alarm. Manson called Christian something that could have earned him a detention back at school. This definitely was not what I could had in mind. The other two guards looked at their leader questioningly. Should we get Ashwa? Asked one of them. I don't think he's here, said the leader. He studied Christian for a few seconds and then made a decision. And I don't want to bother him anyway if this is a joke. Let him go and we will see. One of the men produced a pair of sharp pillars. He moved behind Christian and leaned down. I heard a sound of plastic popping, as if the flick-like scuff gave away. Grabbing a hold of Christian's arms, the guards jerked him upright and lead him over to me. Christian, exclaimed Manson, furry, filling his voice. He struggled against his constraints, shaking his chair a little. Are you out of your mind? Don't let them do this. You guys have to die, but I don't, snapped Christian, toasting his black hair out of his eye. There is no other way out of this. I don't really know what was going on now, but I was pretty sure I should be showing a lot more emotion if I was about to die. Two guards flanked Christian on either side, watching warily as he leaned towards me. Christian, I whispered, surprised at how easy it was to sound afraid. Don't do this. His lips twisted into one of the bitter smiles he practiced so well. You and I have never liked each other, Rose. If I have got to kill someone, it might as well be you. His words were icy, praising, believable. Besides, I thought you wanted this. Not this. Please, don't. One of the guards shoved Christian. Get it over with, or get back to your chair. Still wearing the dark smile, Christian surged. Sorry, Rose. You're going to die anyway. Why not do it for a good cause? He brought his face down to my neck. This is probably going to hurt, he added. I actually doubted it could, if he was really going to do it, because he was not, right? I shifted uneasily. By all accounts, if you got all your blood sucked out of you, you also got enough endorphins pumped in during the process to dull most of the pain. It was like going to sleep. Of course, that was all speculation. People who died from vampire bites don't really come back to report on the experience. Christian nuzzled my neck, moving his face under my hair so that it particularly obsessed him. His lips brushed my skin, every bite as soft as I recalled from when he and Lisa kissed. A moment later, the points of his fangs touched my skin, and then I felt pain, real pain, but it was not coming from the bite. His teeth only pressed against my skin. They don't break it. His tongue moved against my neck in a lapping motion, but there was no blood to suck. If anything, it was more like some kind of weird, twisted kiss. No, the pain came from my wrist, a burning pain. Christian was using his magic to channel heat into my flex cuffs, just as I had wanted him to. He could understand my message. The plastic grew hotter and hotter as he continued his ballet there drinking. Anyone who could see him looking closely could have been able to tell he was half faking it, but too much of my hair was blocking the guard's view. I know plastic was hard to melt, but not now did it really understand what that meant. The temperature reduced to do any damage were off the charts. It was like plunging my hand into lava. The flex cuffs smeared my skin, hot and terrible. I squirmed, hoping I could relieve the pain. I could not. What I did notice, however, was that cuff gave a little when I moved. They were going softer. Okay, that was something. I just had to hold out a little longer, despite I tried to focus on Christian's bite and distract myself. It worked for about 5 seconds. He was not giving much in the way of endorphin, certainly not enough to combat that increasingly horrible pain. I whimpered, probably making myself more convincing. I cannot believe it, muttered one of the guards. He is actually doing it. Beyond them, I thought I heard a sound of Mia crying. The cups burning increased. I could never felt anything so painful in my life. and I could been through a lot. Passing out was rapidly becoming a very real possibility. Hey, the guard suddenly said, "What is that smell?" That smell was melting plastic, or maybe my melting flesh. Honestly, it don't matter because the next time I moved my wrist, they broke through the groovy, scandally cups. I had 10 seconds of surprise and I used them. I leapt out of my chair and pushing Christian backwards in the process. He could had a guard on either side of him and one still held a pilot. In a single motion, I grabbed the pilots from the guy and plunged them into the cheek. He gave some kind of grunting scream, but I don't want to see what happened. My window of surprise was closing, and I could not waste time. As soon as I let go of the pilots, I punched the second guy. My kicks were stronger than my punches, and it's a general rule, but I still hit him hard enough to startle him and make him stagger. By then, the guard's leader was in action. As I feared, he still had a gun, and he went for it. "Don't move," he yelled, aiming at me. I froze. The guard I could punch came forward and grabbed my arm. Nearby, the guy I could stab was moaning on the floor, still training the gun on me. The leader started to say something and then yelped in alarm. The gun glowed faintly orange and fell from his hands. Where he could held it, the skin burned red and angry. Christian had hit the metal. I realized, yeah, we definitely should have been using the magic things from the start. If we go out of this, I was going to take up Tasha case. The Morai anti-magic custom was so installed in our brains that we don't even thought to try this sooner. It was stupid. I turned on the guy holding me. I don't think he expected a girl my size to put up so much of a fight. Plus, he was still kind of stunned over what had happened to the other guy and the gun. I managed enough room to get in a kick on his stomach, a kick that could have earned me A in my combat class. A grunt at the impact and the motion followed him back into the wall. In a flash, I was on him, grabbing a fistful of his hair. I slammed his head against the ground, hard enough to knock him out, but not kill him. Immediately, I sprang up, surprised the leader had not come after me yet. I should not have taken him that long to recover from the shock of a heated gun. But when I returned, the room was quiet. The leader lay unconscious on the ground with a newly freed manson hovering over him. Nearby, Christian held the palace in one hand and the gun in the other. It had to still be hot, but Christian power must be made him immune. He was aiming at the man I could stab. The guy was not unconscious, merely bleeding, but like I had, he froze, breathed that babble. "Holy shit," I muttered, taking in the scene. Staggering over to Christian, I held out my hand. "Give me that before you hurt somebody." I expected a biting remark, but he simply handed the gun over with a shaking hand. I shoved it into my belt. Studying him further, I saw how pale he was. He looked like he could collapse any moment. He could go on some pretty major magic for someone who could be starved for 2 days. "Means, get the cuffs," I said, without turning his back on the rest of us. Manson took a few steps backwards towards the box where our captors had kept their stash of flex cuffs. He pulled out 3 strips of plastic and then something else. With a questioning glance at me, he held up the roll of duct tape. "Perfect," I said. He bound our captors into the chairs. One had remained conscious, but we knocked him out too, and then put the duct tape over all their mouths. They could eventually come to, and I don't want them making any noise. After realizing Mia and Eid, the 5 of us huddled together and planned our next move. Christian and Eid could barely stand, but at least Christian was aware of his surroundings. Mia's face was streaked with tears, but I suspected she could be able to take orders. That left Christian and me the most functional in the group. "That guy's watch say it's morning," he said. "All we have to go to do is get outside, and they cannot touch us as long as there is no other humans at least." "They said Ashok was gone," said Mia in a small voice. "We should just be able to leave, right?" "Those men have not left in house," I said. "They could be wrong. We could not do anything stupid." Carefully, Manson opened the door to our room and peeked out into the empty hallway. "Think there is a way outside down there?" that could make our lives easier, I muttered. I glanced back at the others. Stay here. We are going to check out the rest of the basement. What if somebody comes? Exclaimed Mia. They won't, I assured her. I was actually pretty sure there was no one else in the basement. They could have come running with all the racket. And if anyone tried to come down the stairs, we could hear them first. Still, Manson and I moved casually as we scattered around the basement, watching each other's backs and checking around corners. It was every bit the rat's maze I remembered from our initial chapter. Twisted hallways and lots of rooms. One by one, we opened each door. Every room was empty, save for the occasional chair or two. I shuddered, thinking that all these were probably used as prisoners, just as ours had been. Not a good diamond window in this whole place, I muttered. When we finished our sweep, we have got to go upstairs. We headed back towards our room, but before we got there, Manson caught hold of my hand. Rose. I stopped and looked up at him. Yeah? His blue eyes more serious than I could ever seen him, looking down at me regretfully. I really screwed things up. I thought about all the events that had led this to. We screwed things up, Manson. He signed. I hope, when all this all done, we can sit down and talk and figure the things out. I should not have gotten mad at you. I wanted to tell him that that was not going to happen. Then, when he disappeared, I could actually been on my way to tell him things could not be better between us, since this does not seem like the right time or place to bring up a breakup. I lied. I squeezed his hand. I hope so too. He smiled and we returned it to the others. All right, I told them. Here is how it is going to be. We quickly dashed out of a plan and then crept out the stairs. I lead, followed by Mia, as she tried to support a reckless Christian. Manson brought up the rear, practical dragging Eat. It should be first. Manson murmured as we stood at the top of the stairs. You're not. I snapped back, resting my hand on the doorknob. Yeah, but if something happens. Manson, I interrupted. I stared at him hard, and suddenly I heard a brief flash of my mother that day when the Ashwak attack had broken, calm and controlled, even in the wake of something so horrible. They could be needed a leader, just like this group did now, and I tried as hard as I could to channel her. If something happens, you get them out of here. Run fast and run far. Don't come back without a herd of guardians. You will be the one who gets attacked first. What am I supposed to do? He hissed. Leave you? Yes, you forget about me if you can get them out. Rose, I am not going to Manson. I again convinced my mother, fighting for the strength and power to lead through. Can you do this or not? We stared at each other for several heavy moments while the others held their breaths. I can do this, he said stiffly. I nodded and turned back around. The basement door squeezed when I opened it, and I grimaced at the sound, scarcely daring to breathe. I stood perfectly still at the top of the stairs, waiting and listening. The house and its ethnic decorating looked the same as when he could have bought it. Dark blends covered all the windows, but along the edge I could see the bright light peering in. Sunshine had never tasted so sweet as it did at the moment. Getting it meant freedom. There was no sounds, no movements. Looking around, I tried to remember where the front door was. I was on the other side of the house, really not far in the grand scheme of the things, but as gaping scam at the moment. Scott out with me. I whispered to Manson, hoping to make him feel better about bringing up the rear. He let Eid lean on Mia for a moment and stepped forward with me to do a quick sweep of the main living area. Nothing. The path was clear from here to the front door. I exhaled in relief. Manson took hold of Eid again and we moved forward, all of us tense and nervous. God, we were going to do this, I realized. We were really going to do this. I could not believe how lucky we had gotten. We could be soon closer to disaster and had just barely made it through. It was one of the moments that made you appreciate your life and want to turn things around. A second chance, you swear, you won't let go to waste. Your realization that I heard them move almost at the same time. I saw them step in front of us. It was like a magician conjured Ishak and Elena out of the thin air. Only I know there was no magic involved this time. Strigo just moved up quickly. They must have been in one of the other main floor's rooms that we could assume were empty. We had not wanted to waste the extra time looking. I raked at myself internally for not having checked out every inch of the whole floor. Somewhere in the back of my memory, I heard myself taunting my mother in stanza class. It seems to me like you guys messed up. Why don't you scoop out the place and make sure it was clear of Strigo in the first place? Seems like you could have saved yourself a lot of trouble. Karma is a real bitch. Children, gone Ashish. This was not how the game works. You're breaking the rules. A cruel smile played over his lips. He found us amusing. No real threat at all. Honestly, he was right. Fast and fat, Manson, I said in a low voice, never taking my eyes off the street light. My, if looks could kill. Ashish arched his eyebrow as something occurred to him. Are you thinking you can take us both on by yourself? He chuckled. Eileen chuckled. I gritted my teeth. No, I don't think I could take them both on. In fact, I was pretty sure I was going to die. But I also pretty sure I could provide one hell of a distraction first. I lunged towards Ashish but pulled the gun on Alina. You could get a jump on human guards, but not on Strigoi. They saw me coming practically before I even moved. They don't expect me. They don't expect me to have a gun though. A while Ashish blocked my attacking body with almost no effort whatsoever. I still managed to get a shot of Elena before he seized my arms and restrained me. The gun's report rang aloud in my ears, and she screamed in pain and surprise. I aimed for her stomach, but had just jolted into hitting her thigh. Not that it mattered, neither spot could kill her, but the stomach could have hurt a lot more. Ashish held my wrist so hard I could thought he could break the bones. I dropped the gun. I hit the floor, bounced, and slid towards the door. Elena struck and raged and clawed at me. Ashish told her to control herself and pushed me out of the reach. All the while, I failed as much as possible, not so much to escape to make a nuisance of myself, and then the sweetest of sounds, the front door opening. Manson had taken advantage of my distraction. He could left Eid with Mia and sprinted around me and grabbing Strigo to open the door. Isha turned with a lightning fast speed and fizzed and screamed as sunlight poured over him. But even though he was suffering, his reflex was still fast. He jerked himself out of the patch of light into the living room, dragged Alina and me with him, her by the arm and me by neck. Get them out. I yelled. Ashish began Alina breaking out of his grip. He shoved me to the floor and spun around, staring at his escaping victims. I grasped for breath now that his grip on my throat was gone and peered back to the door through the tangle of my hair. I was just in time to see Manson drag Eve over the threshold. Out in the safety of the light, me and Christian were already gone. I nearly wept in relief. Ishash turned back on me with all the fury of steel, his eyes black and terrible as he loomed over me from his great height. His face, which had always been scary, became something almost beyond comparison. Monstrous. Don't even begin to cover it. He jerked up by my hair. I cried out in the pain, and he brought his head down so that our faces were pressed up to one another's. You want a bite, girl? He demanded. You want to be a blood whore? Well, we can arrange that in every sense of the word, and it will be not sweet, and it will not be numbing. It will be painful. Compulsion works both ways, you know, and I will make sure you believe you are suffering the worst pain of your life, and I will also make sure your death takes a very, very long time. You will scream, you will cry, you will beg me to end it all and let you die. Ah, shush, cried Ellen in expectation. Just kill her already. If you could done it sooner, like I said, none of this could have happened. He kept his grip on me but flicked his eyes towards her. Don't interrupt me. You're being melodramatic, she continued. Yeah, she really was winning. I never could have thought a Strigoi could do that. It was almost comical and wasteful. Don't talk back to me either, he said. I'm hungry. I'm just saying you should let her go, or I will kill you. We all turned to the new voice, your voice dark and angry. Manson stood in the doorway, framed in light, holding my dropped gun, and I shall study him a few moments. Sure, I shall finally said. He sounded bored. Try it. Manson, don't hesitate. He fired and kept firing until he attempted the entire clip into Aisha's chest. Each bullet made the Strigoi flinch a little, but otherwise he kept standing and holding on to me. This was what it meant to be an old and powerful Strigoi, I realized. A bullet in the thigh hurt a young vampire like Alina, but for Aisha, getting shot in the chest multiple times was simply a nausea. Manson realized this too, and his features hardened as he threw down the gun. Get out. I screamed. He was still in the sun, still safe. But he does not listen to me. He ran towards us, out of his protective light. I redoubled my struggles, hoping I could pull Ishak's attention away from Manson. I don't. Ashok shoved me into Elena before Manson was halfway to us. Swiftly, Ashok blocked and seized hold of Manson, exactly as he had done to me earlier, only unlike me, Ishak don't restrain Manson's arms. He don't jerk Manson upright by the hair or make long, rambling threats about an agonizing death. Ishak simply stopped the attack, grabbed Manson's head with both hands, and gave a quick twist. There was a sneaking crack. Manson's eye went wide. Then they went blank. With an impatient sign, Ishak realized his hold and toasted Manson's limp body over towards where Alina held me. It landed before us. My vision swam a nonsense and dizziness wrapped around me. There, Ashok, said Alina, see if that is all tide you over, and save some for me.